For many years, teachers have asked me to tape the stories I tell. I have consistently said no, because these oral tradition stories should be told, not heard on tape. For this occasion, however, I have made an exception, for this tape will be used by children who have heard these stories as told in kindergarten. May they all become storytellers too. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived with her mother in a cottage by the edge of the woods. She was told by her mother that she could play on the front porch and in the front yard, but that she must never go over the fence and into the woods, because if she did, the gunny wolf would get her. Well, one day the little girl's mother went to town to buy some groceries, and the little girl was swinging on the front porch back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and all of a sudden she said, "Oh, dear me, today is my mother's birthday, and I haven't got a thing for her. What can I give her?" Well, just then she espied a pretty little white flower in the front yard, and she said, "Ha-ha, I'll get my mother a bouquet of fresh flowers for her birthday." So she walked out in the front yard, and as she picked flowers, she sang this little song. Kum-ka-ki-wa, 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 kum-ka-ki-wa. And all of a sudden she found herself up against the fence. Now she had a rather nice bouquet, but not as large a bouquet as she wanted, because it was her mother's birthday. She looked over the fence and into the woods, and she espied hundreds of beautiful flowers. So she climbed over the fence, and while picking flowers and walking deeper and deeper into the woods, she sang this little song. Kum-ka-ki-wa, 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 kum-ka-ki-wa. And a hunk-a-hunk-a-hunk, the gunny wolf grabbed her and said, "Little girl, I'm going to eat you up." "Oh, Mr. Gunny Wolf, please don't eat me up." "Well, sing me that good and sweet song." And she did. Kum-ka-ki-wa, kum-ka-ki-wa. And when she sang, the gunny wolf fell asleep. Kum-ka-ki-wa, 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 kum-ka-ki-wa. So she got up and started to tiptoe home, and a hunk-a-hunk, the gunny wolf grabbed her again and said, "Little girl, I'm going to eat you up." "Oh, Mr. Gunny Wolf, please don't eat me up." "Well, sing me that good and sweet song." Kum-ka-ki-wa, 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 kum-ka-ki-wa. So she got up and started to tiptoe home, and a hunk, the gunny wolf grabbed her again and said, "This time, little girl, I'm really going to eat you up." "Oh, Mr. Gunny Wolf, please don't eat me up." "Well, sing me that good and sweet song." Kum-ka-ki-wa, kum-ka-ki-wa. But this time, when the little girl got up, she used her head, and she went right on singing. Kum-ka-ki-wa, 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 kum-ka-ki-wa. She climbed over the fence, got safely back in her own yard, and never again did she disobey her mother. Once upon a time in the great green forest there lived 3 bears, a great huge bear, a middle-sized bear, and a wee small bear. Each bear had his own porridge pot. The great huge bear had a great huge pot, the middle-sized bear had a middle-sized pot, and the wee small bear had a wee small pot. Each bear had his own chair, and each bear had his own bed. One morning after the porridge had been made, and because it was hot, and so that the bears would not burn their tongues, they took a walk in the woods. While they were gone, a nasty little old woman came walking down the path. She saw the house. She went up to the house, looked in the window, peeked through the keyhole, seeing no one at home, lifted the latch and walked right in. Now, incidentally, the 3 bears, being hospitable bears, would most certainly have invited her in, had they been at home. Now, the nasty little old woman saw the 3 bowls of porridge on the table. She took the great huge spoon, put it into the great huge bowl, tasted the porridge, and it was much too hot, and she said a naughty word about that. She took the middle-sized spoon, put it into the middle-sized bowl, tasted the porridge, and it was much too cold. She said another naughty word about that. She took the wee small spoon, put it into the wee small bowl, tasted the porridge, it was neither too hot nor too cold, but just right. So she ate it all up. And then she said a really naughty word about that, because there was not much porridge in the bowl. She went into the living room. She sat in the great huge chair. It was much too hard. Sat in the middle-sized chair. It was much too soft. Sat in the wee small chair. It was neither too hard nor too soft, but just right. She sat in it so long she broke it down. And then she said a wicked word about that. She went upstairs to the bedroom. She climbed in the great huge bed. It was much too high at the head. Climbed in the middle-sized bed. It was much too high at the foot. Climbed in the wee small bed. It was neither too high at the head nor too high at the foot, but just right. So she put her dirty head down on the pillow and fell fast asleep. Now the 3 bears came back from their walk in the woods. They walked into the kitchen, and the great huge bear, seeing the great huge spoon in his great huge bowl, said in his great huge voice, "Someone's been eating my porridge." The middle-sized bear, noticing the middle-sized spoon in the middle-sized bowl, said in his middle-sized voice, "Someone's been eating my porridge." The wee small bear knew at a glance that someone had eaten his porridge. They walked in the living room, and the great huge bear said, "Someone's been sitting in my chair." The middle-sized bear said, "Someone's been sitting in my chair." The wee small bear knew immediately that someone had sat in his chair. They walked upstairs to the bedroom, and the great huge bear, noticing the pillow on the floor, said in his great huge voice, "Someone's been sleeping in my bed." The middle-sized bear, noticing the pillow was not plumped, said in his middle-sized voice, "Someone's been sleeping in my bed." The wee small bear said in his high, shrill, squeaky voice, "Someone is sleeping in my bed." Now that nasty little old woman had heard the voice of the great huge bear. It was as if the thunder were roaring or the wind were howling. She'd heard the voice of the middle-sized bear. It was as if someone had appeared before her in a dream. But when she heard the high, shrill, squeaky voice of that wee small bear, she opened her eyes. She saw, standing on one side of her bed, 3 bears. She rode out the other side and ran straight for the open window. The 3 bears, being good housekeepers, always opened the window of their bedchamber in the morning to air out the room. Now, whether in the jump from the window the nasty little old woman broke her neck, or whether she got lost in the woods, or whether she found her way out of the woods, was arrested by a constable, and put in a house of correction, we do not know. We only know that the 3 bears are still living happily in the great green forest. Once upon a time, there lived an old man and old woman. One morning the old woman went out on the front lawn, and there lying on the lawn was a sparrow dying. The old woman gently lifted the sparrow up so that the sun could dry the dew on the sparrow's wings, fed the sparrow, and the sparrow regained his health. The sparrow, to show his appreciation, sang a beautiful song to the old man and old woman every morning. Now the sparrow sang early in the morning, which pleased the old man and old woman because they liked to get up early and get on with their work. But it so happened there was a mean old woman on the other side of the road who did not like being awakened early. So one day she caught the sparrow and cut off its tongue. The sparrow could no longer sing and flew home to his family. When the old man and old woman found out about it, they decided to pay a visit to the sparrow and tell him how sorry they were. They started out early one morning. They walked through the fields. They came to a bridge. They knew not which way to go. They looked all around and saw no one, until the old man espied a bat, taking its daytime nap, hanging upside down from the bridge. The old man went up to the bat and said, "Dear bat, can you tell us the way to the tongue-cut sparrow's home?" The bat said, "Yes, cross the bridge and go up the mountain." They crossed the bridge and went up the mountain. When they got to the top of the mountain, there was a fork in the road, and they knew not which road to take. They looked all around and saw no one, until the old man espied a little field mouse poking its head up through the grasses. The old man went up to the field mouse and said, "Dear field mouse, can you tell us the way to the tongue-cut sparrow's home?" The field mouse said, "Yes, take the road on the right, go down the mountain, and through the woods you'll come to the home of the tongue-cut sparrow." They did. They knocked on the door. The sparrow came to the door. He was very happy to see this old man and old woman and invited them in, and he and his family fed them and entertained them. Just before it was time for them to leave, the sparrow left the room. He came back in a few minutes later with 2 baskets, one small, one large. He said, "I would like to give you one of these baskets as a gift." The old woman whispered to her husband, "Husband, if we take the larger basket, we may be taking most of the sparrow family's treasures." So the old woman said to the sparrow, "My husband and I are very old. We have a long way to go to get back to our house. It will be much easier for us if we take the smaller basket." So the sparrow gave them the smaller basket, and they walked back through the woods, up the mountain, down the mountain, across the bridge, and through the fields until they came to their home. They put the basket on the table, and then they took the lid off the basket. There in the basket were piles of pure gold and rolls of pure silk. Now it so happened the mean old woman on the other side of the road was peeking in the window when they took the lid off the basket. She came over the next day and said, "I'm so sorry for what I did to the sparrow. I would like to go and apologize. Can you tell me how to get there?" And they told her how to get there. She walked through the fields and across the bridge, up the mountain, down the mountain, and through the woods, and came to the home of the tongue-cut sparrow. She knocked on the door. The sparrow came to the door. He was not happy to see this old woman, but he was polite, so he invited her in, and he and his family fed her and entertained her. Just before it was time for her to leave, the sparrow left the room. He came back in with 2 baskets, one small, one large. He said, "I would like to give you one of these as a gift." She took the larger basket. She had trouble getting through the woods. The basket kept catching on the branches of the trees. Going up the mountain was difficult. The basket was heavy. She was out of breath by the time she got to the top. Going down was not easy. She was afraid she might lose her footing, and the basket would roll down the mountainside. By the time she got to the bridge, it was nightfall, and she knew the bridge was slippery, and she crossed carefully, foot over foot so that the basket might not fall into the swirling waters below, and then through the fields and into her house. She put the basket on a table, but before she took the lid off the basket, she carefully closed all of the blinds so that no one could see her treasure. And then she took the lid off the basket. Out of the basket came hordes of creatures. They stung her and bit her and scratched her and laughed at her. She rushed outside. The creatures swooped down upon her and lifted her up and carried her off. She was never seen again, but the old man and old woman lived happily for the rest of their lives. Once upon a time, there was a young man whose name was Akimbo. Akimbo was the poorest man in the village. He had no money and he had no food. So he decided to leave the village and set out to see what he could find. He walked and he walked and he walked. He finally came into a deep forest, and in the deep forest he met an old man who was sawing wood. Akimbo helped the old man stack the wood. When Akimbo had finished stacking the wood, the old man said, "Where are you going?" Akimbo said, "I have no money, I have no food, I'm setting out to see what I could find." The old man said, "Look behind the tree." Behind the tree was a cow. The old man said, "Take the cow back to your hut and say to the cow, 'Coo, coo, coo.'" Akimbo took the cow back to his hut and said to the cow, "Coo, coo, coo." The cow opened his mouth and out fell a gold coin. Coo, 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 out fell another gold coin. It wasn't long before he was rich, but he had to take a trip and he knew he couldn't take his cow with him, so he went to his good neighbor Boomba and said, "Boomba, I have to take a trip. I can't take my cow with me. Would you watch my cow for me while I'm gone?" Boomba said he'd be glad to. And then Akimbo said, "But don't say coo, coo, coo. Remember that. Don't say coo, coo, coo." Boomba said, "Oh, of course not." Well, as soon as Akimbo was out the door, he said, "Coo, coo, coo." The cow opened his mouth, out fell a gold coin. Coo, 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 out fell another gold coin. Boomba said, "This is a cow worth having and a cow worth keeping." When Akimbo came back to pick up his cow, Boomba gave him a cow, but not his true cow. Akimbo took the cow back to his hut and said to the cow, "Coo, coo, coo," and the cow said, "Moo." "Coo, coo, coo," and the cow said, "Moo." It wasn't long before he was poor again. He went back to the old man in the woods and said, "My cow no longer gives me gold coins." The old man said, "Look behind the tree." Behind the tree was a sheep. The old man said, "Take the sheep back to your hut and say to the sheep, 'Boo-roo-roo.'" Akimbo took the sheep back to his hut and said to the sheep, "Boo-roo-roo." The sheep opened his mouth and out fell a silver coin. Boo-roo-roo, out fell another silver coin. Well, it wasn't long before he was rich, but he had to take another trip, and he knew he couldn't take his sheep with him. So he went to his good neighbor Boomba and said, "Boomba, I have to take a trip. I can't take my sheep with me. Would you watch my sheep for me while I'm gone?" Boomba said, "With pleasure. But don't say boo-roo-roo to the sheep. Remember that. Don't say boo-roo-roo." Boomba said, "No, never." Well, as soon as Akimbo was out the door, he said, "Boo-roo-roo." The sheep opened his mouth. Out fell a silver coin. Boo-roo-roo. Out fell another silver coin. Boomba said, "This is a sheep worth having and a sheep worth keeping." When Akimbo came back to pick up his sheep, Boomba gave him a sheep, but not his true sheep. Akimbo took the sheep back to his hut and said to the sheep, "Boo-roo-roo," and the sheep said, "Bah." "Boo-roo-roo," and the sheep said, "Bah." Wasn't long before he was poor again. He went back to the old man in the woods and said, "My cow no longer gives me gold coins, my sheep no longer gives me silver coins." The old man said, "Look behind the tree." Behind the tree was a chicken. The old man said, "Take the chicken back to your hut and say to the chicken, 'Clack, clack, clack.'" Akimbo took the chicken back to his hut and said to the chicken, "Clack, clack, clack." Chicken laid an egg. Clack, clack, clack. Chicken laid another egg. Akimbo said, "Well, it's not gold, it's not silver, but they're eggs and I can eat them." He was no longer hungry. But he had to take another trip, and he knew he couldn't take his chicken with him. So he went to his good neighbor Boomba and said, "Boomba, I have to take a trip. I can't take my chicken with me. Would you watch my chicken for me while I'm gone?" Boomba said, "Of course." "But don't say clack, clack, clack to the chicken," said Akimbo. "Oh, no, I wouldn't think of it," said Boomba. Well, as soon as Akimbo was out the door, Boomba said, "Clack, clack, clack." Chicken laid an egg. Clack, clack, clack. Chicken laid another egg. Boomba said, "Well, it's not gold, it's not silver, but they're eggs and I can eat them. This is a chicken worth having and a chicken worth keeping." When Akimbo came back to pick up his chicken, Boomba gave him a chicken, but not his true chicken. Akimbo took the chicken back to his hut and said to the chicken, "Clack, clack, clack," and the chicken went cluck, cluck, cluck. Clack, clack, clack. Cluck, cluck, cluck. Wasn't long before he was poor again. He went back to the old man in the woods and said, "My cow no longer gives me gold coins, my sheep no longer gives me silver coins, my chicken no longer lays eggs." The old man said, "Look behind the tree." Behind the tree was a stick. The old man said, "Take the stick back to your hut and say to the stick, 'Stick, dance for me.' And when you've had enough dancing, say, 'Mooloo.'" Akimbo took the stick back to his hut and said to the stick, "Stick, dance for me." The stick started beating him up. It beat him and beat him and beat him. It beat him so hard he almost forgot the magic word, and then he remembered it and said, "Mooloo." The stick dropped to the ground. Akimbo said, "I think I should go see my good neighbor Boomba." He went to his good neighbor Boomba. He said, "Boomba, I have to take a trip. I can't take my stick with me. Would you watch my stick for me while I'm gone?" Boomba said he'd be glad to. "But don't say stick dance for me. Remember that. Don't say stick dance for me." Boomba said, "Oh, no, never." Well, as soon as Akimbo was out the door, he said, "Stick, dance for me," and the stick started beating him up. It beat him and beat him and beat him. He could not escape the blows of the stick. After a few minutes, Akimbo walked back in. Boomba said, "Make this stick stop beating me up." Akimbo said, "You give me my true cow, my true sheep, my true chicken, and I will make the stick stop beating you up." Boomba said, "Anything, anything at all." Akimbo said, "Mulu." The stick dropped to the ground. Akimbo went home with his true cow, his true sheep, his true chicken, and lived in happiness and prosperity for the rest of his life. Once upon a time, there was a little duck whose name was Drakestail. Drakestail was a hard-working, thrifty little duck. But he lived in a kingdom where the king was a spendthrift and a ne'er-do-well. The king was always borrowing money from everyone in his kingdom, and one day he came to Drakestail and said, "Drakestail, I want to borrow $100. Well, Drakestail was so flattered that the king wanted to borrow money from him that he loaned the king $100. Several years went by, and the king had still not repaid Drakestail. So one day Drakestail said, "Quack, quack, quack, I'm going to get my money back." And he started on down the road. He came to a fox. The fox said, "Drakestail, where are you going?" Drakestail said, "Quack, quack, quack, I'm off to get my money back." The fox said, "Well, may I go along with you?" Drakestail said, "Yes, make yourself small, jump into my mouth, get into my gizzard, and I'll carry you along." So they went along, and after a while they came to a ladder. The ladder said, "Drakestail, where are you going?" He said, "Quack, quack, quack, I'm going to get my money back." The ladder said, "May I go along with you?" Drakestail said, "One can't have too many friends. Make yourself small, jump into my mouth, get into my gizzard, and I'll carry you along." They went along, and after a while they came to a river. The river said, "Drakestail, where are you going?" He said, "Quack, quack, quack, I'm off to get my money back." The river said, "May I go along with you?" Drakestail said, "One can't have too many friends. Make yourself small, jump into my mouth, get into my gizzard, and I'll carry you along." They went along, and after a while they came to a wasp's nest. The wasp's nest said, "Drakestail, where are you going?" "Quack, quack, quack, I'm off to get my money back." The wasp's nest said, "May I go along with you?" Drakestail said, "One can't have too many friends. Make yourself small, jump into my mouth, get into my gizzard, and I'll carry you along." They went along, and after a while they came to the king's palace. Drakestail went up to the guard and said, "Would you please tell the king that I, Drakestail, am here to get my money back?" The guard went up to the king and said, "There's a duck down there by the name of Drakestail who wants his money back." The king said, "Take that duck and throw him into the chicken-turkey coop." Now the chickens and the turkeys didn't want a duck in their coop, so they started pecking away at Drakestail, and he knew he wasn't long for this world if he didn't do something. So he said, "Fox, fox, come out, or Drakestail's life will be in doubt." Out came the fox and started eating up those chickens and turkeys, and Drakestail escaped with his life. When the king found out about that, he was furious. He said, "You take that duck and throw him in the well." They threw Drakestail into a deep well. Drakestail said, "Ladder, ladder, come out of your hold, or Drakestail's days will soon be told." Out came the ladder, and Drakestail climbed right out. When the king heard that, he was even angry. He said, "You take that duck and throw him into a fire." They threw him into a raging fire. Drakestail said, "River, river, outward flow, or to death Drakestail must go." Out came the river and put out the fire. When the king heard that, he said to his guards, "You go bring that duck to me." They caught Drakestail and brought him to the king. The king ordered his guards to take out their swords and kill Drakestail. Drakestail said, wasp's nest, make a sally, or Drakestail nevermore will rally." Out came the wasp's nest, and the wasps started stinging the king and all of his guards. They ran for their lives. They jumped out the tower window, landed in the courtyard below with their necks broken and their feet straight up in the air. Now the people in the village wondered why the king and his guards were lying in the courtyard with their feet straight up in the air. They walked into the palace, walked up the steps to the throne room. There, seated on the throne, was Drakestail wearing the king's crown. The people in the village said, "Hooray, hooray! Heaven has brought us down this thing. Long live our new king." Drakestail stood up and said, "Lords and ladies of the kingdom, let's go to dinner. I'm hungry." Once upon a time, there lived in a cottage in the woods an old man, an old woman, a little boy, and a little girl. Now, every morning the old woman made biscuits with sody saleratus, and every morning a little squirrel jumped up on the kitchen window ledge to eat biscuits made with sody saleratus, because he just loved biscuits made with sody saleratus. But it so happened that one morning the old woman was making biscuits, and she ran out of sody saleratus. She said, "Old man, go down to the country store and buy me some sody saleratus." So the old man walked on down to the country store. He walked in, bought the sody saleratus, and started on back. He came to the bridge, and up came an enormous bear. The bear said, "Old man, I'm going to eat you up." And the old man said, "Oh, please don't eat me up, Mr. Bear." Mr. Bear said, "I don't know why not." Gulp. Well, now they were getting hungry back at the cottage, and the old woman said, "Little boy, run down to the country store and see where the old man is." So the little boy ran on down to the country store, asked the storekeeper if the old man had been in there. The storekeeper said, "Yes, he was in here, and I sold him some sody saleratus. He's probably playing by the side of the road." So the little boy starts running on back. He comes to the bridge. Up comes the bear. The bear says, "Little boy, I'm going to eat you up." "Oh, Mr. Bear, please don't eat me up." "I don't know why not. I ate up the old man, and now I'm going to eat you." Gulp. Well, they were getting even hungrier back at the cottage, so the old woman said, "Little girl, skip on down to the country store and see where the old man and the little boy are." So the little girl skipped on down to the country store, asked the storekeeper if the old man and the little boy had been in there. The storekeeper said, "Yes, they were in there, and they're probably playing by the side of the road." So the little girl skips on back, comes to the bridge. Up comes the bear. The old bear says, "Little girl, I'm going to eat you up." "Oh, don't eat me up, Mr. Bear." "I don't know why not," said the bear. "I ate up the old man, the little boy, and now I'm going to eat you." Gulp. Well, now by this time the old woman was really very hungry, so she started walking on down to the country store, asked the old man asked the storekeeper if the old man, the little boy, the little girl had been in there. The storekeeper said, "Yes, they've all been in here, and they're probably all playing by the side of the road." So the old woman starts on back. She comes to the bridge. Up comes the bear, and the bear says, "Old woman, I'm going to eat you up." "Oh, please don't eat me up, Mr. Bear." "I don't know why not," said the bear. "I ate up the old man, the little boy, the little girl, and now I'm going to eat you." Gulp. Well, now by this time that little squirrel was starving, so he frisked his way on down to the country store, walked in the store, asked the storekeeper if the old man, the little boy, the little girl, and the old woman had been in there. The storekeeper said, "Yes, they've all been in here. They're probably playing by the side of the road." So the little squirrel starts on back. He comes to the bridge. Up comes the bear, and the bear says, "Little squirrel, I'm going to eat you up." "Oh, don't eat me up, Mr. Bear." "I don't know why not," said the bear. "I ate up the old man, the little boy, the little girl, and the old woman, and now I'm going to eat you." And that bear lunged at that little squirrel. But you know what that little squirrel did? He just climbed right up to the top first branch of the tree. Now the bear was a tree climbing bear, so he was right behind that little squirrel. And that little squirrel kept going up and up and up with the bear right behind him. But by the time the little squirrel got to the top branch of the tree, he leapt across to the top branch of the next tree. Now the bear, who had eaten the old man, the little boy, the little girl, and the old woman, was so heavy that when he tried to leap across, he fell straight down between the two trees and split right open. And the old man and the little boy, the little girl, and the old woman and the squirrel went back to the cottage for breakfast. And the old woman made biscuits with sody saleratus, and the old man ate 22 biscuits, and the little boy ate 14 biscuits, and the little girl ate 12 biscuits, and the old woman ate 18 biscuits. But that little squirrel, who had never been so hungry in his whole life, ate 33 biscuits made with sody saleratus.